Walter Mzembi, welcome to Hard Talk.
Hello, Stephen.
We have to start with the economy. Your government is in a terrible mess. While much of Africa is growing, the Zimbabwean economy is slowing. It is actually in the midst of a profound crisis.
Going forward, I think we will be able to get out of this actually in the very short term. And a lot of deals that we've concluded in the last 6 months attest to that. We are guided by ZIMASET, the Zimbabwe Sustainable Social Transformation Policy document, which in the first place establishes the need to get our energy in order. In the beginning, even in the Bible, what was prescribed was, let there be light, and God saw that it was good. And we are not deviating from that.
No,
we are saying
precious, I have to say,
by
there's precious
year
little
2020,
light.
we add an additional 5,000 megawatts to our energy grid on the back of deals already concluded that are in the process of implementation.
Yeah, well, you do have an energy crisis. You've alluded to it already, but you have crises wherever you look. I'm just looking at the words of your own finance minister, Patrick Chinamasa, who admitted not long ago that he was embarrassed about the state of the public finances. He admitted that 76% of revenues received go to pay public servants. It's unsustainable.
Going forward, it will be fixed. It will be fixed on the back of rebasing of the economy. In fact, we are understating our net worth. You know our net worth much better than us. You know how much we have in terms of mineral endowments, in terms of human capital, which is basically in orbit here and elsewhere in the world.
Yeah, well, that's all theory. What's practical reality is that you've got a debt of over $10 billion that you can't pay.
$10 billion, which was created out of the economic sanctions that were imposed on us and severely undermined our ability to pay that debt. Now, I noticed that in the last fortnight, we have received a delegation from the United Kingdom. I would impress on them that the starting point really is counting the cost on sanctions so that we imbue and restore the capacity of Zimbabwe to pay back that debt.
Yeah,
going forward.
The thing is, you've got to convince your own people, never mind outsiders, that you know what you're doing. I mean, I've just looked at the local press in Zimbabwe over the last few weeks. It's a record of factories closing down, unemployment unofficially believed by most independent economists to be around 80%, people barely being able to afford enough food to eat across your country. I mean, that is the reality today.
We have a bamba harvest this year. In fact, for the first time in 14 years, we had the best season. And I can guarantee you that we are secure food-wise. But we want to make sure that as we go forward into the next 3-4 years up to 2018, riding on the back of commitments that we made in the last general election, first and foremost, we are able to add an additional 5,000 megawatts on our energy grid. On the back of that, we are then able to pump water, because without energy, you cannot pump water. So water reticulation, bringing water to homes and to our irrigation systems and fields is a major priority. But even in addition to that, you will notice that we have signed deals that will make sure that Zimbabwe is accessible. 14 major tenders in the process of being evaluated or actually at feasibility study level. We will have our roads widened, dualized, and new ones commissioned by 2018. And on the back of that, we can then develop our agriculture, because the markets will be accessible. Grain storage will be back to what it was in the past.
You make it all sound so rosy, so optimistic, with everything being fixed in a very short space of time. I do sometimes wonder whether you in the Zimbabwean government don't live in some sort of alternative, parallel universe. I mean, you, for example, in your own portfolio, outlining visions of a massive hundreds of millions of dollars theme park that you say is going to be built at Victoria Falls. Who on earth is going to finance that?
Well, to the extent that we are already commissioning a major airport, which will be an air traffic hub in the Victoria Falls by June 2015. We must then close the infrastructural gap by making sure that we bring up in the destination of the Victoria Falls an ultra-modern city that will be juxtaposed to the colonial legacy that the Victoria Falls is today.
You called it a Disney. I just wonder whether how this strikes the people of your country when you make a speech talking about building a Disneyland in Africa with shopping malls, exhibition facilities, casinos spreading over 300 acres. Is this really
it's actually 300,
what Zimbabwe needs today?
It's 300 hectares, and tourism is a low-hanging fruit. If we have established an air traffic hub in the manner that we have done with the Victoria Falls, we are actually preparing to receive visitors. And I have done a benchmark study of the Niagara Falls, which is shared between Canada and the United States. It's a $30 billion economy. While it's the Victoria Falls that I share with the Zambians is a $1 billion economy.
Your people have no jobs.
Is actually in closing
Many of your
gap.
people are struggling to survive, and you're talking about bringing Mickey Mouse to Victoria Falls.
1 in 10 every people employed in the world are employed by tourism. And I'm not inventing or reinventing the wheel. I'm basically saying it is tourism, which is a low-hanging fruit, which will provide the greatest opportunity to employment in the next 3 to 4 years.
Even if, supposing you could find the finance to make this vision of yours a reality, is this really what you want for Zimbabwe? A Zimbabwean-born travel writer, Lisa Granger, she listened to your plans. She said, if this ever came to pass, it would be like building a casino right next to the pyramids.
Well, you'll be very interested to know that the London Stock Exchange, in the first instance, was the first one to respond to my clarion call for the modernization of the Victoria Falls. And international...
One of the great natural wonders of the world, and you want to modernize them.
We are not desecrating it. We are doing this development beyond the airport and 10 kilometers before the boundaries and perimeter of the World Heritage Site.
I don't wish to be rude, but I come back to this point about a parallel universe. I mean, foreign direct investment has been hemorrhaging, draining out of Zimbabwe over recent years. I'm sure you know these figures better than me, but last year the UN reckons Mozambique, not far away, another emerging African economy, attracted over $7 billion worth of FDI, foreign direct investment. Zimbabwe's figure was 400 million, about 6% of Mozambique's. That's the reality. So where on earth is the money going to come from?
That's 400 million computed by the IMF and the World Bank. But they forget to add onto that figure the initiatives that we have done with China and Russia. And those two, and I've witnessed that, and I was part of the President's delegation recently on an official visit to China, and we concluded $4 billion worth of deals. A fortnight later,
you know better than I.
We concluded another one for $3 billion.
Had hoped to get tens of billions from China, and in the end, you didn't get the loans and the aid you wanted. All you got were a series of deals based on infrastructure and mortgaging your future mineral revenues against Chinese money. That's what you got.
We have not let go a single natural resource on the back of the deals that we concluded in China. They are infrastructural deals premised and structured on the back of future receivables arising out of energy sales, energy tariffs, which we have revised.
These are the words of the Chinese economic attaché, Han Bing. He said China will only grant credit to Zimbabwe if it is secured against earnings from minerals. That's the reality. You're just mortgaging off your own resources.
Hear it from me. The honest truth is we are securing it against future receivables, against the business model itself. And the business models that we presented are around energy, and energy is an attractive tariff in Zimbabwe. And that's why even in your own backyard here, British expertise led a delegation of companies that came for a scoping mission, which included, and amongst other things, and primarily energy deals, because they know that they have a payback capacity inherently built in them, arising out of energy tariffs.
It seems to many Zimbabweans you are, in essence, selling off the family silver to China because the IMF and other lenders simply won't lend to you. I mean, let's just look at the words of Domenico Finizza, who's the Assistant Director of the IMF for Africa. He says, we cannot, in the current situation, lend to Zimbabwe because Zimbabwe runs arrears with the fund and also with other institutions like the World Bank and the Africa Development Bank. In other words, you are so far into debt with all of these international institutions that no longer will any of them lend you any money.
Unfortunately, the untold story, you see, is that Germany and Japan were rebuilt out of the Marshall Plan, out of their false money. In Africa, colonialism has not experienced any reparation, including slavery. And that goes even to post-independent Zimbabwe. It has not benefited from the effect of sanctions. What we should be placing on the table of the British and the British expertise before they come to us, like a knight in shining armor, is the cost of sanctions, which I put at no less than 100 billion. It is that which should offset any existing debt. And we have a $7 billion debt stock today, which we must net off against the impact of sanctions.
Right, so here
but we have not...
If I may say so, Minister, it's
yeah.
a somewhat mixed message. You come to London and other Western cities and you say, look, Zimbabwe is open. We want you to come visit. We want your economic partnership. We want to do deals with you. And then you, and not just you, frankly, but the President himself, Mr. Mugabe, you make speeches back home in which you lambast the UK, the United States, and the European Union, other Western countries for, as the President says, trying to strangle the Zimbabwean economy. He says a diabolical plan to undertake regime change. So which is it? Do you want to reach out to the West, or do you still see the West as the enemy?
I think we've already reached out. If you look at our UNWTO General Assembly last year, in itself a manifestation of global endorsement, it was oversubscribed by countries that included the UK and others. No less than 147 countries came to what was later on described by the UNWTO General Secretary as the best ever UNWTO General Assembly in the history of General Assemblies. Well, so we are at that stage where we have actually been endorsed by the world as good for business. And manifest to that is really the recent visit by your own people.
Yeah, good
to our
for business,
country,
you say.
But more importantly, even the revocation of Article 96 by the EU just a couple of days ago. But I don't celebrate that myself at this stage until we place on the table the impact of their unilateral withdrawal and unilateral imposition of sanctions on the country. It is a cost, including the brain drain that moved our children into European capitals, which is working for you more than Zimbabwe.
Well, you focus obviously on the historical damage you say has been done by colonialism and then by sanctions. I want to focus on something else.
How do you move forward?
Well,
if you don't
that's a great question. How do you move forward? Let's talk about one policy your government has adopted, which seems to me to be raising questions about how you move forward, and that's what you call indigenization. You say you're open to FDI, foreign direct investment. You want investors from overseas to come. But then your message to those investors is that all companies operating in Zimbabwe must be majority owned by native Zimbabwean people.
Absolutely.
Now, you read the words coming out of UK, Canadian and other Western businesses inside your country. They are profoundly concerned. The Canadian ambassador saying recently, Canadian businesses deeply concerned with this uncertain business environment. They no longer understand what's expected of them. They are not willing to give up a controlling stake in their companies.
Well, what I could tell you is that our thresholds on indigenization and empowerment are actually lower than what is happening in Qatar, 80%, in Botswana, 80%. To the extent that we are able to tell you that we are not taking that value without placing money on the table. That is the message I think that investors want to know. We are not expropriating. We are going to pay for our value.